Welcome everybody. So in this video we're going to continue right where we left off in the last one, and we've still got this sort of extruded octagon object we created, and we're going to learn about another way you can create sketches. So in these videos we've always been creating a sketch on sort of a blank plane, but you can actually create sketches on planar faces. So what I did there, I'm going to hit Control Z to get back. I went to the Create a Sketch button, I clicked on it, and then you notice I can select these planes, or I can select any of the faces on my object. So I'm going to select the octagonal face on my object, and you'll notice it snaps to it. And so now I can start to design on this. You will also notice it will let me snap to the corners here, and what I really want to do is I want to get a circle in the center. So if I go over here to the left side and I sort of slowly move down it, it'll find the center point. And you can see that little dotted line that tells me I'm following the center. Let me see if I can find this one too. So what I want to do is find the center point of both of them, and I do that by just touching my cursor to the top and bottom lines. I'm going to click, which is going to set the center of the circle. And we'll do a circle that's 5 millimeters in diameter. That's a nice round number. And so now I've got this circle here. We're also going to add a rectangle, so I'm going to hit the R button, and I'm going to do a rectangle. Oh, that's an edge rectangle. So what I actually want here is a center rectangle. I want a rectangle with a specific center. So I'm going to go up to Create. I'm going to select Rectangle. I'm going to select Center Rectangle because I want all this stuff to be centered in the octagon. So we're going to do this one at, let's say, 7 millimeters by 7 millimeters. And so now we've got a sketch that is face-centered on our, I think it's called an octagonal prism, when you have an octagon in 3 dimensions like that. We're going to go ahead and finish up this sketch. So the question is, what does this let us do? We can actually do a bunch of stuff with this now. So imagine this octagon were part of some motion system, right? Imagine that we had it as a part of a 3D printer or something else that was moving around, and we wanted to, we needed some way to couple it to the motor. So one of the common ways you do that is you can add, so I hit Q and I selected my little circular face there. And so I'm going to extrude this out 10 millimeters. I'm going to extrude out 5 millimeters. That looks a little bit better for the part. And so now I've got an octagonal part that I could pop into a motor coupler using this. And I can roll this back on the little timeline down here if I want to, but I'm actually just going to hit Command Z, Control Z on a PC, and get rid of it because I want to do some other stuff. Oh, that just rolled it back. Oh, so I have to do that a couple of times because it's actually rolling back my adjustment of the timeline. But I get back to where I have the sort of sketch and the octagonal prism. So the other thing I can do if I hit Q is you can use a press pull not just to extrude. So if I put in a positive number, it's going to go out in that direction. But if I put in a negative number, it's going to cut it. And you can see it's doing a cut because it has a little red shading there. So if I run this now, I actually get a cut through the middle of my piece. Now it looks like a washer or some other something that you can slide onto a dowel or something like that. So you'll notice when I do that cut, it makes my sketch invisible. So I'm going to make my sketch revisible by hitting the little eyeball icon over here. I could also cut out, because I've got a rectangle sketched on here, I could cut out a rectangular hole. And I'd have to do that by putting in -20. Then I get that. I can make my sketch invisible again. So there's a lot of operations and cuts that you can do to this by making sketches and adding particular shapes to a face on it. So let's say I don't want to do any of that. I want to get back to my sort of solid octagonal prism. Let's say I want to make like a pencil holder or something. This is way too small to be a pencil holder, but let's imagine it was big enough. So I'm going to create a sketch on the top here, and I am going to make a circle. So I'm going to find that center point, and I'm going to make a circle here. Again, we're going to put this at, let's say, 2.5 millimeters. If we were making a pencil holder, it'd have to be bigger. A pencil is probably 8 to 10 millimeters in diameter. And I can also specify a distance from the top here by pressing the D key, selecting the circle, and selecting the top line. And then that is going to let me say, I want this to be, I got to actually get these selected first. All right. I want this to be 10 millimeters in. Why is that important? So this thing, I know this thing is 20 millimeters because it popped it to the middle. Let's say we're going to put it at 5 millimeters. Let's say I'm going to make another 2.5 millimeter circle that is aligned with the center of this. I'm also going to dimension this to be 5 millimeters away from the edge. So that's important because it lets us do this in a regular way. If you were actually making one of these, you'd figure out how many different pencil holes you wanted it to have. You'd figure out what distance you needed them to be regular, but we're just going to do 2 in this one because it's a little test. So I can finish my sketch here, and then I can hit Q. I can select -20 for the distance, and it's going to poke a hole all the way through. So it makes the sketch invisible after I do one press pull. I'm going to hit Q, select the other circle, hit -20, and it is going to cut a hole through this. Now I could cut another hole through this if I wanted to. I could do -20 here. And you'll notice it keeps the little curve. You can sort of see this. This cut here has a curve because I cut this through it second. Now, if we wanted to sort of clean this shape up, because one of the things you don't want a lot in your designs is a bunch of sharp edges, we could do a Q. We could do if you hit the Q key and you select a line, it's going to fillet it. And so last time we filleted for sort of structural reasons. We're going to do a very tiny fillet here where we do a 2 millimeter fillet on these individual edges. And that's just going to make it look a little bit nicer. We're not going to do that on the bottom edges because we want it to sit flat on the desk. But we're going to do them all the way sort of down the side. And this will look a little bit nicer. Again, if this were a pencil holder, this would look a little bit nicer on the desk. It's got a sort of more rounded feeling. We could also do, if we wanted to, we could get rid of all of those fillets. And we could do what's called a chamfer, which is in the modify. It's over here. And a chamfer is like a fillet that's not rounded. Oh, that's pretty big. Let's chamfer this at, let's see, 1 millimeter. Let's do 0.5. Yeah, just a little tiny chamfer. So I'm going to do that again. Oh, that was a fillet. There's not a shortcut key for a chamfer, so I just have to go select chamfer every time. So I could do that on all these as well. And again, this is really just aesthetic. It just looks a little bit better if you've got these edges rounded. I prefer the fillet to the chamfer, but you've got both options. So do that. Gonna finish it up. And we could modify. We could go, if we decided that we didn't like those chamfer sizes, we could actually go back down to the timeline here, right-click, select Edit Feature, and we could do larger or smaller chamfers. So we could do a 1 millimeter, which is going to be much bigger. Then we'd want to change all these other ones to make them match, but I'm not going to do all of that. So this ability to make sketches on the faces of objects is a really, really important one because it lets you make objects that have features in multiple directions. Because if you're thinking about just working from a sketch and extruding it in 1 or 2 directions, you can't make very complicated objects that way. But if you are going to individual faces of the objects, if you're making sketches on them, and if you're then using those sketches to do press pulls to either add little bits of material to it or to perform cuts through it or partway through it, that gives you a lot more ability to make interesting things, and we're going to use some of those in the first challenge. So there's one more thing I want to show you, and this is the ability to do what's called a loft between 2 separate objects. So we're going to make a new sketch, and we're going to make just an object right next to the side of ours. And I am just going to start with a circle. That is, and I'm just going to put it out wherever. I'm going to start with a 10 millimeter circle, and I'm going to finish my sketch. So one of the other things you can do in Fusion 360 is you can add not objects, but the sort of things you need to make objects like planes. So we're going to do an offset plane here, and I'm going to select Construct Offset Plane. I'm going to select my little circle, and I want the plane to be 10 millimeters away. So I'm going to make another sketch on this plane, and you'll notice it lines it up with my circle. I'm going to make a circle that's centered in the same place, and I'm going to make this circle 20 millimeters. So it looks like these circles are mashed on top of each other until I hit Finish Sketch. And then I can see that they're actually 20 millimeters separate, right? If I rotate to the side, I can see they're separated by 20 millimeters in that axis. So the reason I did this is because I'm going to perform a step called a loft. And a loft creates a transitional shape between two or more sketch profiles or planar faces. I'm going to show you what that means. So I'm going to select a loft, and it's going to want me to select two profiles. You'll notice immediately what it does when I select those profiles. I'm going to hit OK. And I get this sort of wedge-shaped piece right here. Now, you don't have to just connect up two circles. I can actually go to my first sketch and edit it. And I could change this. Let's say I want to change this to be a rectangle. Let me just, oh yeah, I got to do my center rectangle again. Let's create a 10 by 10 millimeter center rectangle here. I'm going to finish sketch, and then I'm going to edit my loft. Oh, I just deleted it. Well, let's make those sketches visible again. That's fine. So now I'm gonna recreate that loft because I deleted it. I'm gonna do a loft between this. So I have to hold down Shift when you've got a plane cut up into a bunch of little pieces like this. You want to select all of them at once. Oh, it wants to do something very fancy. So let's. And sometimes Fusion 360 is a little bit smarter than we are. So I'm actually just going to get rid of this circle. It's creating a more complicated situation than I want. I'm going to get a warning because my plane 1 was created with reference to the circle, but that's okay. And then I'm going to go back to the end of my timeline. I'm going to create another loft, and I'm going to pick my square and my circle. And when I hit enter here, you can see that it actually smoothly connects the square and the circle, giving us a sort of a strangely rounded part. Again, if I had a reason to have this part, I could hit Q, I could select a fillet, and then I could sort of round these out so that it wasn't quite so sharp. Now, depending on what you're doing, you may need those sharp edges. If you're trying to fit something, you may not. But this is just pointing out that you could use the fillet on in a lot of different situations to sort of smooth out the part. So now if I make my sketches invisible, we can see that we've got a, I think I did one of these fillets differently. Let me edit this. Yeah, this is 4 millimeters. I did the rest as 5. So let's fix this, put it at 5 millimeters. And now this part is symmetrical. So let's say these several tools will give you a lot of new abilities in Fusion 360. And right after this video, so there's not going to be a skills check for this video either, but right after this video, you should be able to start working on the first challenge, which is to reproduce 3 different objects in Fusion 360. When you finish this video, let me know, and I will go ahead and set those objects out so that you can start working on modeling them in Fusion 360. So if you have any questions, if anything in this video is unclear, just go ahead and raise your hand. We'll take a look at it together. Otherwise, good luck on the modeling challenge.